Hey everybody, it's CodePen Radio number 421. I got Alex here this time, the man, the myth, the legend. Yeah, hello. I had to have Alex for this show about packages. Packages pretty much meaning NPM packages. I don't think we have any particular plans to support, like, I don't know, the Dino repository or whatever it is. I don't know. I think there's other package libraries out there. Certainly other languages have them, but we're talking about JavaScript and CSS stuff that live on NPM mostly.
Things hosted on NPM.
Yeah, yes. Some Alex has been thinking about for a long time. And we should be, because we're a front-end thing. We're like a place where front-end developers do stuff. And I'm not sure. I think NPM probably existed the whole time the existence of CodePen existed, but it didn't become as big. It became a bigger deal the longer CodePen existed, essentially. Like the early days of CodePen, I don't think anybody cared.
Yeah, it was back-end only for a long time. I mean, Node was still taking off at the time, I think. And it wasn't even
that's why it's a Node package manager. I know they tried to shed that, but that's still what people think of it as. For sure. So I wanted to say, like, I don't want to bury the lead. If you're listening to this and you're wondering why we're talking about packages, it's because we're talking about the CodePen 2.0 editor, and the CodePen 2.0 editor handles NPM packages for you, and it does it in a really cool way that, frankly, I haven't seen anywhere else, and we should tell you how freaking cool it is. So be marketed at whatever. No, we're trying to give you the back end.
A little bit biased, but it is awesome.
Biased. I also want to give our team Steven some credit here, who, you know, when the idea came up that we were going to do this podcast this week, was like, remember, finger in the air, that I said this on October 19th, 2023. And then it took us a little while to implement it. And it's funny because it's a Slack message that he screenshotted that is literally exactly what we did in the end. So,
I mean, it only took us, 3 years or so? I mean, come on. Makes sense.
Yeah, maybe 2, because we were working on this before. You know, it's not like it just went out the door yesterday or something. But here's the deal. I'm going to tell you how it works now. Alex can correct me if I screw it up, and then we'll circle back and kind of explain how we got there, because I think the history to me is just as interesting as where we ended up. But the line that's been in my head forever that I'd bring up endlessly is import React from React, where React is capitalized and React in quotes at the end of the line is in quotes. But when you see a line like that, they call that a bare module specifier, which I think is the correct thing. And we started using internally the correct terminology, go us. That's not valid what they call ESM, which is ECMAScript imports. When there's just a word like that doesn't start in HTTP, and it doesn't start in a dot, and it doesn't start in a slash that would reference something on a file system or a URL, ESM doesn't know what that is. It's basically invalid code. But you saw it all the time, because what it means is it's an NPM package. So, like, go look in the node modules folder for it. And the thing is, there's just so much code on the internet that has that. That was kind of like our gold star. That's what we're trying to get. That's what I want to support, or at least help people who copy and paste that code or assume code like that works. And that's what we've done in the new editor. If you type import React from React, or in fact, import any package from any package, or any thing that you can import from a package, and it looks to us like a bare module specifier, and that's where Alex came in, and in lots of ways. But I think you had to like figure out if it looks like an NPM package, and then go verify that it is actually an NPM package.
Yeah, we do two things. We parse for it, so like we don't even, we're not really guessing here. We have a pretty darn good idea. Like, hey, you're writing in JavaScript or some derivative of JavaScript, and you're importing a package. So we have, I would say, pretty darn good, 99% knowledge that that's not in just like a random comment in HTML or something. And then we check on NPM to make sure it's a real package. That's a big deal for us. So yeah, we react
while we're
to
at it,
that.
We get the latest version, because we're going to need that too. Why not? Yeah. It's pretty fancy. It involves some tech that we'll get to in a minute, I guess. And now that we know that that's what you mean, we make you a package.json file. So even that was like there's like a little history to that. Like, where do we keep that information? How do we know that? And what we really wanted to expose to users is what version it is, because you should be able to affect and change that, because the statement import React from React doesn't say what version it is. And so, maybe we could put the version in that statement somewhere, and that's a little non-standard. We moved away from that. Maybe we could use our own config file. We moved away from that. Let's use the industry standard, which is a package.json file. Feels good to have done that, if you ask me, because we
definitely the right choice.
Yeah, we can reuse that in a number of ways. We already have. Not to go on too much of a tangent, but our Lightning CSS block respects a browser's list entry in that file, and that's the proper place for that information too. So it feels good to lean into industry standard stuff when you can. So now there's a package.json that says dependencies, and it's got React in there with the latest version that's available on NPM. Well, what does that mean? Do we then NPM install for you and get a node modules folder? We do not, because that's a road that we've traipsed in the past that was not good for us for various reasons. So what it does at the moment is when there's dependencies in a package.json file, Alex's machine, the CodePen compiler, one of the billion things that it does is that when it's about to serve an or when it's about to build an HTML-ish file, basically like it's during the build process, like, I'm about to process and like kind of make the final file that ends in .html. I'm going to make sure that there's an import map. So it's a script type equals import map. This is an industry standard thing that goes into the head, and it's going to have all the dependencies from that package.json file. And then it's going to use an URL to a service called ESM.sh that supports a structure that has a version in it. And then it just works. You can type import React from React. We make the package.json. It links it up in an import map, and that statement works as written. It's deceptively simple, the solution, and really, really nice and wonderful to use. I think.
Yeah, it provides a really great experience. Like our kind of North Star whenever we're trying to figure out how to build a feature as far as like the user experience is concerned is we kind of want you to bring code that you expect to work. We want to make that code just work, So
Yes.
whatever the de facto experience, when you go to tour any front end code, either a library or a project online, we want you to be able to just kind of copy and paste that code and just kind of get going real quickly and give you what you expect. And so that's the beauty of having the package, the import package.
Yeah.
The import map is that essentially like it makes it so that the code just works as if you were using NPM on your file, on your local file system. It's really nice.
Yeah, it is really nice. So you can find code out on the internet that, generally kind of has these bare module specifiers in it because it just assumes you're going to NPM install or something, and it just works. It just works.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying over and over. Even in our own CodePen Slack, we're like, look at this. It just works. We're like,
yeah,
wow.
Honestly, it's one of the things that impresses me the most is when something just works like that, especially something complicated. There's, and there's little nuances to it, like for every JavaScript every little script that references those things, we make sure that it has the correct attributes. And like, I think most browsers still only allow one import map on the page. So like if you have multiple for whatever reason, we will merge those into a single import map. And
exactly.
There's
some
details
nuance
like
to that too, and we'll respect yours over ours in case you want to link up your own import map, because CodePen is a front end sandbox. If you want to mess around with import maps, we don't want to like stop you from doing that. You just do your own import map. Then we totally respect yours, but we'll amend to it if it looks like we need to. Cool. It's a really clean feature in that way. So why ESM.sh? Well, that's going to require a little bit of history to get to. And, this is just the middle of this journey. Perhaps we'll do more. What you haven't seen is like Alex's attempt at doing stuff like this over many years, because this is like a very hard problem to solve. So the oldest time I want to go back to is a time I remember when it's like, for some reason, Google themselves just started like giving out URLs to really popular libraries. It wasn't every library existed in the world, but these were jQuery days. And they'd say, here's a URL to the latest version of jQuery. And they basically encouraged everyone to use that URL to jQuery. And it became advice that you would, if you went to a performance web conference, they would say that. They'd be like, use this. And it's because cache used to be shared across websites. So if you were using jQuery 2.0 or something and you used Google's URL, chances are your browser already had that in cache and you'd get the performance benefit of that. That was true for like a long time. And I don't know how Google got into this game, but they did. And CodePen lived in that time too, and there's lots of pens that just would link up jQuery from the URLs that they gave out. It was a little more rare those days to have a company willing to spend that kind of bandwidth money, just seemingly out of the goodness of their own hearts. That got
I'm going to say that it provided a little bit of data that they may have used to make money in other ways, but I'm sure there was a tiny bit of benevolence there. I don't want to paint them as
maybe
purely.
I mean, they still do it with fonts. Why do they give out fonts to anybody for free for the entire internet? I'm like, obviously it provides some data that's interesting to them. You know, it's nice that they do it, but companies like that don't do anything just purely out of like, you know, benevolence to the world. Like it provides some benefit to them.
I think so. They would call that a win-win.
A win-win. Sure, I like that. Along comes a really popular library that I think usurps Google in popularity called CDN.js. And we leaned into this big time at CodePen because I think they had like a search endpoint or something that we would use too. So the user experience we were going for is we wanted a user to be able to like type in JQU, you know, and then have it be like, oh, you're looking for jQuery. Here's a URL that you can have. And it was a CDN.js URL. And then we'd like allow a one-click thing to like add it to the what we called external resources of the pen. And somehow, some way, people totally understood that and used the hell out of it. They were all about it, you know. And we offered that for a long time. I think if probably to this day, if you go to the classic editor, you can do that. I'm not sure if it's CDN.js anymore. I think we use something else, but. And that project was just on GitHub. And the way you'd get your library on CDN.js was a pull request against that repo. Even jQuery, they just hosted it. So this is like pre-NPM, which it just was weird. You know, like that's how they had to run it or whatever. But that's just like not how things operate anymore. So if you find that weird, I don't blame you. That's not how things go anymore. And even CDN.js has pivoted away from that. And now they just pull stuff from NPM like all the rest of these things do.
Rightfully so, right?
Yeah, rightfully so. So it gets NPM gets more and more popular. Like Alex said, it used to be more back end. Now it has become equal or even more front end, maybe. So along comes this new website, Unpackage. Probably people have seen it, you know. And the point of it is that NPM themselves, they do not give you URLs to individual files that they host. To this day, they don't. I'm not super sure why, but you can't just like link to a file that's hosted in an NPM package through an NPM provided URL. But that's what Unpackage does. It pulls the package somehow, caches it, and allows you to like deep link into a package. But for whatever reason on CodePen, we didn't use this. We just weren't into it. Like we support it. If you want to use those URLs, go for it. But we didn't. And the reason we didn't is because it wasn't really that long before Skypack came along. And we just liked it better because Skypack took it one step further. Unpackage would not build the package for you. It was just about linking. But at the time, like ESM was starting to exist. The industry was changing. An import statement is what I'm referring to as ESM, just is getting more popular. And what Skypack did is it would run the package through something, probably Webpack, right? At the time.
I would imagine so.
Ish. Yeah. And then so a package that was not written for ESM, which was, no joke, like 99% of NPM or something. People just didn't write packages for ESM at the early days of it. They just didn't. They're like, oh, I'm just going to stick to, I think what they called CommonJS, which meant
CommonJS, right? That was the de facto Node.js.
Yeah,
way to
that's what Node had. Yeah. But the world was changing, and Skypack said, we'll run it through Webpack. And then even if the package wasn't written for ESM, it just magically becomes ready for ESM. And that was like way better for CodePen. So we did that. And then there's this long period. Again, that period extends till now, where if you type in import React from React in the classic editor, we don't just make it work. This little yellow thing comes up and it says, would you like to convert this statement into using Skypack? But Skypack basically bails. The Skypack team is what the Astro team is now. I'm sure there's different people involved now, but it was like Fred's thing, and now Fred is Astro.
Was this a side quest for them, or was it like how they started?
It's how they started. I mean, Fred did other stuff. He's got an interesting tech lineage, but yeah, they ran Skypack and then tried to make a business model out of it. The problem is it's really similar to how Vite worked, and Vite kind of won. Vite is crushing it, you know? Good job, the idea being that like when you're working locally, you shouldn't be bundling all the time. You should just rely on the ESM tree, you know, to like just do its thing. And that way, if you need to make like micro changes to one file, you don't have to wait for the world to bundle. You just change the one little part of it and the ESM tree updates. And it's just a much more quick local development process. That's how hot module reloading works and blah, blah, blah. And Skypack tried to do that. They just, I don't know, I think Vite just won or something. And they even wrote to us and they're like, we got to call it on Skypack. So sorry about those URLs or whatever. They still resolved to this day. They didn't like ruin Skypack. But ESM.sh, which is what we use now, came along and just, I don't know, they were more ready to handle the issues. They use the Go thing you like, ESBuild.
ESBuild, yeah. ESBuild.
Instead of Webpack, so they don't have the same kind of problems. Anyway, so ESM.js rules, and they make packages into ESM2, which is still an issue on, you know, now it's whatever, 50% of NPM still isn't really converted to ESM, but ESM.sh just handles it. They do a good job. We could self-host it or something, or we could write our own version of it. We just, for now, do just use them because they've been really reliable and do a good job. So that is your history lesson on it, why we do what we do. But Alex is the one who kind of wrote it. Do you want to talk about your, like the times you tried to be ESM.sh?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely failure mode. I think initially the real honest take I got on it was I was trying to use Webpack to kind of package up a import and all its dependencies. And that was just, it was always really close, but it was never quite there. There was always like a small bit that didn't quite work. And it honestly felt like if we had gotten to the point where it was like 98% working, I think I would have been okay with it. But we were like at like 88%, you know, like if you did bare like imports where you were doing a deeply nested import into the package, it wouldn't resolve correctly. Sometimes some of the packages were missing. But it was cool. It was kind of, what's that image website where like you kind of create a URL and then it'll dynamically adjust the URL, the originators of that. I know a lot of people do it now.
What, like you mean like resize the image or make like a placeholder image? Oh yeah. Cloudinary was a big one that did that.
Yeah, I think I took inspiration from Cloudinary where like you could essentially just dynamically put the URL or the name of the package in the URL, and then we would dynamically check to see if it was on if it was already generated. If it was, we would just serve that up. Otherwise, we would dynamically generate it, which was cool. Like the initial request would take a little bit of time, but after that, everything was super fast because it was on CDN. And we were trying to do that with Lambda and all these things, and it was just not quite there yet. And I always struggled. I went through a lot of the Webpack source code and tried to modify that. And honestly, it was just kind of like not the right time. I didn't have the right amount of time I didn't have the right tools or anything like that. I feel like with ESBuild, it's dramatically different because with ESBuild, it's purpose built to serve ESM. And at the time, it was still such a nascent technology and I didn't know enough about the solution, but we've rounded we've tried to solve this problem several times. And ESM just did such a great job. And now, at the time, the only tools I had at my disposal were JavaScript, Ruby, things like that. Whereas with Go and TypeScript, I feel like between the two type systems that those provide and the speed of like Go and things like that, we're so much more capable of solving the problem. And thankfully, we don't even have to, because ESM.sh has done such an amazing job.
Yeah, they do a good job.
But man, I mean, I probably spent months on that project, and it was like really complicated. Yeah. I learned a ton.
I remember optional dependencies are a pain in the ass, or like people would just lie in their package about what things they actually needed as dependencies, and it would
that was a huge part of it. That's funny that you mentioned that. I forgot. Like, we essentially had to read. My code would read the package.json, it would say like, I don't have any peer dependencies. And it's like, no, you actually do, because whenever you build this package, it has tons of peer dependencies, or sometimes there was code that was written to only work against a file system. And it was really popular, but like lots of little quirks and things like that. So it ended up like, in order to make these packages reliable enough to work on CodePen, it just I could never get it to that point. And we ended up abandoning that project.
And you've always been really careful about like, I'm not going to ship this thing knowing that I need to support it forever in this state, And so not shipping it was always like, it wasn't a big problem. It wasn't a do or die thing. It was kind of a nice to have. Like, it's important, but it's more important that we don't ship something that's a disaster,
Yeah, it would have been incredibly nice to have. And, like, when you had something like Code Sandbox that was doing such a great job of it, they kind of solved it by loading all these packages, creating this like in-memory file system on the browser. But we have never liked that experience for a myriad of reasons, just because like it has to load so much content.
We should talk about that. That's an important aspect of this, is that the speed of this all is very important to us. And they've very publicly said, because, the Code Sandbox approach was kind of like, we're just going to give you a Docker in the cloud. And we always were kind of like, ooh, dog, we kind of tried that. And that was rough sauce for speed and for money and for debuggability and all this stuff. But they, to their credit, they did a good job with that. But it was just, how they supported NPM packages? They just ran NPM install and downloaded them, and then they had them. That's freaking bandwidth crazy. It's slow and it's expensive. And they publicly said, this is really expensive. This is hard for us to support en masse. And we're always like, well, we kind of knew that, but also it's good to have it verified. Like, we need to last as a company here. We're trying to do the business part of the company too. We can't go down that road. And now we don't have to, and get this good experience. It took us time to land in the right place.
Yeah, that's a big part of it for us, right? It's like it's the maintainability of the solution, the cost of the solution. Like, we don't want to limit what packages you use on CodePen just because like you're on a free account or something like that, and so the economics have to play out correctly, and we don't want you to have a glitchy solution where it's like 80%. If something works 80% of the time, even 85%, honestly, it feels like it hardly ever works, because you're just going to run into too many packages that just have issues. And so, but the economics of it were huge. Like, I know that the one of the founders of Code Sandbox, he publicly said like, our bandwidth bill is insane. And that's something that we have to keep in mind. Like, we serve terabytes of data, and we love Cloudflare, and they help us massively with cost, but you do get to a level where Cloudflare is nowhere near free, and you're paying quite a bit. So,
well, that's why ESM.sh doesn't care either. They're like, it's just Cloudflare,
Right. Yeah, but they have to do it in a certain, even them, I imagine that like there's what is, what the marketing pages say, and then there's like the reality of like, hey, you start hitting terabytes of data, like even Cloudflare is going to notice.
Yeah, for sure. And we're not done yet. Like I say, like, maybe we need to self-host this at some point. I don't know. Maybe I should just, because I want to be upfront about the limitations of this too. It doesn't work for server side stuff. I mean, for the most part, people are just building client side stuff on CodePen anyway, but the 2.0 editor is kind of changing that. We don't have a ton of like static site generator blocks yet, but of course we're actively working on that. And there is some, like, for example, we run Vite for you in the specific context of Vue usage, but still there's Vite configs now, and those are executed in Node. And you might think, oh, well, then I'll just use this little, Vite plugin or something that's off NPM. This source, import map thing doesn't work in that environment. You can't do that yet. And of course, we want you to be able to do anything on CodePen. So that's just known, and we'll address it over time. Let us know what your use cases for that would be. But yeah, there's limitations to our implementation as well.
Yeah, it doesn't solve the build time dependency problem. It only solves the render time dependency problem. And that's something, I mean, there's quite a few solutions, and thankfully, like Chris went into such great detail describing, like, we've been down this road. Like, we have a ton of experience, and it's like, finally, we feel like we have not just the knowledge and the tools and the language, but also the wisdom of just having failed over and over again. And so there's so many ways we could solve it nowadays that at this point, it's kind of like, what's the best way to solve the problem? Not can we solve the problem, which is really cool. So that's something that we're pretty excited about.
Mm-hmm. We even have some of the pieces in place. There's an open source project called Verdaccio that we use internally for other reasons, but is very like, it's trying to be a local NPM cache kind of thing. And we actively use it, and it may be possibly part of the solution in the future for NPM caching something. I don't even fully get it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it would be like kind of a self-hosted NPM, and it's the cool thing about Verdaccio is it acts like kind of a pass-through. So, like, let's say you're going to download React a million times, because that's kind of what we would have to do. Instead of hitting NPM a million times on your server, you can just go to your local Verdaccio. You're skipping a whole network hop out to the internet, and you're also going to, you're going to save NPM. You're not going to get throttled by NPM because you're downloading the same package a gazillion times, and so it just helps speed and performance and the entire experience. We can whitelist and blacklist packages that we allow or don't allow. It gives us complete control over the NPM experience, which is a big deal for us as a company.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking this import map thing is going to stick around now. There's some momentum behind it. I think people are realizing what a good kind of experience it can be, even on like production stuff. Like it can be a nice approach to that.
Especially for development, it's exceptional. Like when you're developing your app, you just kind of want the dependencies, and then when you want to build your production level website and deploy it, that's the next step for us, to be able to make sure that that's optimized. But for right now, when you're just developing, it's honestly perfect.
Yeah. We'll see how it shakes out. More and more, it's been kind of like, bundling it's good now, but it may not be forever. I don't know, just because
fingers crossed.
HTTP works and all that.
Yeah, I would love for with HTTP3 and things like that, it's becoming less of a thing that you need to do, but we'll see.
And just a random middle time shout out here to JS Deliver too, without an E at the end, because they're like kind of a mod. They're like what CDN JS probably should have evolved into, that allows you to link to NPM and GitHub and even like the WordPress plugin repo and stuff. We use some of their API stuff when you want to not use ESM, which is still a thing these days. If you want to like link to a library just as a script tag with source or whatever, we still have packages search, and it still will give you a script tag to use if you'd like. That's all powered by JS Deliver, and they have a competitive product to ESM.sh called ESM.run that's really similar. So it's nice to have some options out there too, which I like. All right, I think that's all to say about that. Have a play with packages. Like a ton of our templates use this feature. It's been solid since the day we released it, which is possibly something of a miracle, but
yeah. And let us know how we can improve it, because we absolutely love it. We're looking to like add on to this. This is going to be like a big part of the CodePen experience. Hopefully it's just transparent and it just works. Like, that's a big deal for us. We want to make sure that things work the way you expect it to.
Indeed. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Bye, y'all.